So, Samson Dauda was allegedly over 300 pounds at his past 2 shows, claiming to weigh 305 pounds, which would make him the heaviest Mr. Olympia in history. The previous heaviest Mr. Olympia was Big Ronnie. I've already done a video on this, so check it out on my channel. But today I want to focus on the other heaviest Mr. Olympia winner everyone thinks of. When they hear Samson bragging about his weight, Yep, the king himself, Ronnie Coleman, yeah buddy. Now, all these claims about weights and heights are almost like WWE stats with pro bodybuilders, so for scaling today, I'm bringing back something I've done before on this channel. Follow along closely. This is Ronnie Coleman versus Jay Cutler at the 2003 Mr. Olympia. Now, focusing on Jay Cutler here, let's overlap this photo with one of Jay and Phil Heath at the 2011 Mr. Olympia. Did you catch that? Keep your focus on Jay Cutler as he's being used as the unit of measurement here. Based on Jay Cutler's size, I'm getting a sense of how Phil Heath would look next to Ronnie Coleman on stage. It may not be perfect, but you can't get more accurate than this. Stay with me because we're eventually going to get to Samson Dauda, but let's first take a moment to look at what is probably the best matchup we never had in bodybuilding history. Ronnie Coleman versus Phil Heath. I bet most of you in the scaling legion in the comment section thought Phil would look much smaller next to Ronnie. Well, guess what? There was only a 5 cm difference between them when standing tall. That's less than 2 inches. This difference would shrink even more as they hit their poses, but I digress. This is not about Ronnie versus Phil. We still need to get to Samson Dauda. For that, we have a few more steps. At the 2020 Mr. Olympia, we had Phil Heath and Hadi Choopan on the same stage. I've looked through all the photos from that show, and they never stood directly next to each other on stage, but since they were on the same stage, it's easy to bring them together into the same frame. So here is Phil next to Hadi Choopan on stage, with Phil Heath as the unit of measurement based on the scaling from the previous photo of him and Jay. Most of you have probably already figured out where this is going because we have plenty of instances where Hadi and Samson Dauda stood on the same stage, the most recent being at this year's Olympia, so using the same logic and carefully maintaining the scale from the beginning, Hadi Choopan becomes the unit of measurement now. This brings us to Samson Dauda versus Hadi Choopan on stage, on the same scale as Ronnie Coleman versus Jay Cutler when we started all this. Like I said, it may not be perfectly accurate, but it's close enough. All that remains is to put Ronnie Coleman and Samson Dauda side by side based on this scaling, and they would look similar to this on the same stage. I would still replace these pics of them with 2 of better quality, but of course, keeping the scaling so we can get our final product, 2003 Ronnie Coleman versus 2024 Samson Dauda with the most accurate scaling possible. Now, if you Google it, Ronnie and Samson both come up at the same height, 5 feet 11 inches, but here it looks like Samson is taller than Big Ron. Most of these heights are listed in imperial measurements using feet and inches. The inch is bigger than the centimeter. 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. So measuring in the metric system will give you more accurate results. But I digress. This happens because people tend to round up measurements. For example, 5 feet 9.5 inches could become 5 feet 10 as well on paper. Similarly, 5 feet 10.5 could be rounded down to 5 feet 10. This would result in a 1 inch difference in reality between 2 people who appear to be the same height on paper. This, combined with different posing techniques, could result in 2 guys being listed as the same height but looking different when standing next to each other. And it makes sense to me that Samson would appear taller than Ronnie given that Samson has almost 20 pounds on him. Ronnie was allegedly 287 pounds here and Samson is 305 pounds. If they were the same height, Samson would definitely look heavier here. Let's briefly go through the mandatory poses here. There shouldn't be much to debate. No disrespect to Samson, he has one of the best physiques of the recent Mr. Olympias, but 2003 Ronnie is the single best bodybuilding physique in history. It's untouchable even by the runner-ups for these titles. In the front double biceps, we can see where the sport has actually evolved because these two perfectly represent the eras they come from. Ronnie comes from a time when mass and conditioning were everything, even if it meant sometimes having a stomach that looked too relaxed, to put it nicely. Samson clearly represents today's era where overall flow and aesthetics are crucial and the vacuum pose has become almost essential. Personally, I don't know what type of physique is better for the sport or for the athletes themselves, but as a fan of mass monsters, I'll always prefer a physique like Ronnie's, which wins everything except the midsection here. To get back to the theme of this video, I honestly don't see how Ronnie could be 18 pounds lighter than Samson. If those weights are accurate, Samson definitely has a denser bone structure or something, because in terms of overall muscle, Ronnie seems to be packing more mass onto his frame. This difference is even more noticeable in the front lat spread. Ronnie definitely doesn't look lighter than Samson here, but Samson does have a wider bone structure, and from this scaling he seems taller than Big Ron. Bones should weigh more than muscle, right? So it's possible Samson could be around 305 pounds and Ronnie around 287. Jay Cutler even claimed Ronnie wasn't heavier than 280 here and that the bigger number was fabricated. But I digress. Back to the pose, Ronnie obviously wins this one, especially since Samson's midsection doesn't necessarily look better than his. In the side chest pose from the side, you can really see how massive Samson is. He's turned more toward the front, which gives the illusion of being way more massive than Ronnie, but there's no doubt Samson is a big man. Ronnie was known for having the best chest of the modern era, and while he may have better details and striations than Samson, Samson's chest is overall bigger and rounder. Some people might call me crazy, but I think this pose could go either way. I'd still pick Ronnie, but Samson holds up strong. If you're one of my regular viewers who enjoys my content but hasn't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. It means so much to us content creators, and for you, it's just a quick click. You're still watching anyway. Thank you. From the back, there's not much Samson could hope for. He wins in symmetry if you want to give him that, and probably has a more pronounced taper, though I wouldn't value taper from the back as much. Otherwise, Ronnie is just otherworldly from the back. He wins everything from the arms to the lower body. He's more massive and more conditioned, so this is a no-brainer. The back lat spread is Ronnie's lights out game over pose. It's worth mentioning that these pictures of Ronnie were taken from a lower angle, so his lower body looks disproportionately bigger than his upper body, especially in this pose where he leans forward. Samson looks more than decent, competitive with other top bodybuilders in this pose, but Ronnie is in his own league. He can't be touched in this pose unless your name is Dorian Yates. Of course, there are poses where Ronnie loses. He actually has two rather underwhelming poses, and the worst is the side triceps, while for Samson, this is one of his strongest poses nowadays, in my opinion. Samson's win in this pose is arguably more dominant than Ronnie's wins from the back. Samson has the better flow, the better midsection, the better triceps, and even the better lower body. Ronnie looks like he's barely trying here. The second pose where Ronnie usually loses is the abs and thighs, and by the looks of it, it's actually pretty close between him and Samson. Luckily, Samson showed up at this year's Olympia with an improved abs and thighs pose, because if you compare it to his other shows, I'm not sure he would beat Ronnie. Ronnie's thighs are out of this world, and even though his waist is clearly distended, his abs are well defined, and with those powerful lats, he gets a pretty decent taper. All in all, Samson takes this pose. His quads are also world class and he has better flow and more aesthetic abs. In the most muscular pose, we can see that Ronnie didn't have the widest structure. Sure, he's not leaning forward like Samson, but it's obvious Samson has a more massive bone structure. This pose is actually closer than I thought. Ronnie has better muscle quality, but that midsection is pretty distracting, while Samson has some incredible thickness. Who do you have winning this pose? Now, this matchup can only have one conclusion. I've been doing comparisons like this for more than 4 years, and I've been watching comparisons done by others for many years before that, and I have never seen 2003 Ronnie Coleman lose a comparison like this. So, of course, Samson Dauda at the 2024 Mr. Olympia isn't going to be the one to do it, but it was pretty interesting. Samson held up well against Ronnie, and I don't think any other representative of today's lineup could represent this era better than him in this matchup against the GOAT. What are your thoughts on this comparison? Also, what do you think about my scaling in this video? Did you find it accurate? Did you like how I did it? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like for the algorithm and subscribe for more videos like this. See you in the next one.